Well, thank you to Danny and everyone. Such great content today. Let's give them a round of applause. We have been teed up for this great ending discussion on farming. We know that we've learned a lot about the food system today, but the food system would be nothing without the people that are growing and raising all of that food that we purchase. So we have farming experts here. These folks represent, through their organizations, a lot of the growers and ranchers in our country, and so we are eager to hear from them what they really need to succeed, and especially new and young farmers, what's different, what's plaguing them, what's keeping them in the field. So to start, Lindsey, I want to hear what are some of the structural obstacles facing young farmers, some that maybe we haven't heard about yet, and what's being done by your organization and others to give them success and a head start?
Great question. So I am the executive director and co-founder of the National Young Farmers Coalition. If you're not familiar with us, we were founded in 2010 by 3 farmers, myself included, struggling to get started in agriculture. We had been trained with apprenticeships and through mentorships, but the path just wasn't there. You have a successful business, but if you don't have a place to capitalize that business, if you don't have healthcare, if you don't have anyone to work on your farm, you can't make it. So that piece of farm viability, and farm viability specifically for young people in agriculture, is what we focus on. We're a membership organization like these other organizations, FFA and National Farmers Union represented. Here we have 41 chapters now in 29 states, groups of young people working together to support their local community of farmers and their success, but also engage in the policy process as well. And this past year, in November, we released a survey of 3,500 young farmers, ages 40 and under, from all 50 states. And we asked them this question you just asked me, and that is, what is the biggest challenge that you are facing in your agricultural career? And number one was land access. Land access was the number one challenge for new farmers, not from a farming background, from multi-generational farmers. It was the biggest thing keeping young people from getting into agriculture, and the reason why young people were quitting the farm. Land access is a phenomenal challenge, and it's a particularly big challenge right now because just in the next 5 years, we expect 100 million acres of US farmland to change hands. We've heard today about the age of farmers in the United States, right? So we have each farmer under 35, there are 6 farmers over 65 to match them, right? So those farmers that are at the age of retirement, they are at the time of transition of their farm. And that's what I'm talking about right now, right? We have to figure out ways to bridge the gap between these generations. These experienced mentor farmers, we have to be able to find a way to help that next generation get on the land. After land access, the next issue is student loans. We, Young Farmers Coalition, have highlighted this issue for some time. Anecdotally, we would be at conferences, farming conferences, and at our chapter events, and people would come up to us and say, I can't pay my student debt and farm. I simply can't. Student debt is a problem for our entire generation. I'm still paying back my student loans, but when you're trying to farm, when you're in a high-risk career, and you're trying to capitalize that farm, and you have a student loan on the balance sheet, it's not a good situation, and it's really hindering the careers of so many young people in agriculture. And the next issue on the list is labor, and that gets to training the next generation of young farmers as well as immigration issues.
So Roger, you work with the Farm Bill intimately and help advocate for what farmers need in the Farm Bill. Are any of those issues a priority, or is there hope for any of those being addressed, or any others that affect farmers in your view?
Yeah. Actually, there is hope. National Farmers Union is the second largest general farm organization in the country. We have about 200,000 family memberships. We're organized in 33 of the states. And when I say general farm organization, take that to mean we've got wheat and barley and corn and soybeans and cattle and hogs and sheep and specialty crops and tomatoes, and the list goes on, conventional and organic and everything else in between. All kinds of those folks are members of ours, and so we're balancing a lot of things, which is really a cool thing to do.
So is your focus then on the farmer, would you say? Or?
Yes, our focus is on the farmer, not the type of farm.
So what are their shared needs? I mean, we just see them in silos a lot.
So when Lindsey talks about land access, capital access, labor, all of these things are important to all kinds of farmers. And they're the same kind of challenges that folks face, whether they are, we've got members who are 10,000 acre farmers. And we've got a member who's a 2,000 square foot farmer.
Where is that?
In Hawaii. He farms on his lawn in town, and he just brought his son into the operation. Okay? I'll let you think about how that works. But so the point is a lot of extreme, but the challenges are very much the same. And to your question, the Farm Bill. If there's anything that this Farm Bill, I think, the members who are writing it have really come to understand and to get behind in a bipartisan way this time, it's a focus on beginning farmers. It's a really big challenge. The statistics that Lindsey talked about, people understand that, and they know that our future depends on new young farmers getting into the business. And so there are a number of initiatives that I expect will be a part of this next Farm Bill that are going to flow through different agencies at USDA, whether they're involved in crop insurance or whether they're involved in access to loans, to credits, or conservation programs. In each of these different titles of the Farm Bill, we're hearing and seeing more and more focus on how can we tweak some of these pieces that typically have gone to sort of traditional farms and have carve-outs for beginning farmers.
So it's opening those programs up to make sure they meet the needs.
Or it's holding set-asides so that all the program isn't sucked up by existing farmers right away. That these young folks that have these challenges that are more substantial than an existing farmer have a chance to get in and access some of those programs.
So you think that that's an agreed upon area if anything passes?
To the degree that anything in this city is agreed upon without it being agreed upon, I would argue that this piece of this next Farm Bill is one of those few places in the Farm Bill where well, I shouldn't make it sound that like there's so few places where there will be agreement, but it is one of those places where it's relatively easy to get political agreement on from both parties because the costs aren't that high.
Right. There's not that many people that want to get into farming. So Mark, you work with FFA and the young people, the future, and tell us a little bit about that world and what you see, what's encouraging to kind of balance all of the obstacles.
Well, we see these tremendously enthusiastic young people that view agriculture as a tremendous opportunity for them. And they see an opportunity in production agriculture. And one of the things that we talk about fairly regularly when I have a chance to be with students is there is a wide range of opportunities in ag. Certainly there are young people in our organization that will be part of succession planning in a conventional farming operation. But there's also young people that see opportunities in the field that Lindsey is in, on more organic farming, or what I would call addressing some niche customer opportunities on a local basis, whether it be natural or other type of production. And we're stressing to our students that is something that they can certainly consider. In fact, we've identified that there are about 255 unique careers available in agriculture. And in a Purdue University study, it indicated that we don't have enough young people that are going through agriculture training to fill all of the jobs
What are some of
that are
those
available.
that might surprise us? That
You
are
know,
considered?
you think about the types of support functions that are needed in agriculture, whether it's supply chain, whether it's HR, whether it's IT, digital communication. You look at the amount of Americans in rural areas that are not covered by broadband. 26 million Americans are not reached by broadband. There's opportunities for young people to become engaged in that kind of opportunity that will support agriculture on a wide basis across the country.
And is FFA still largely in rural areas, or is it?
We are, some of our fastest growing membership is happening in urban and suburban areas. Today we have FFA and agricultural education, and it's important to understand that agricultural education is at the very core of what we do in FFA. We don't exist in FFA without agricultural education in middle and high schools around the country. 55% of our membership today comes from rural areas, which means that 45% of the young people in our organization are in urban or suburban areas. And out of 653,000 members across the country, we're seeing significant growth in urban and suburban areas across the country.
So one thing that I'm also curious about within the Farm Bill and just the future of agriculture is how a lot of new farmers that are coming into farming are doing it from a different point of view. Perhaps they want to farm in concert with the environment or to utilize natural resources more thoughtfully. I work a lot on Chesapeake Bay issues. So how do we see that coming into just the mindset of and the approach of farmers? Lindsey, and then Roger, in the Farm Bill is that there's been some fear about that having its traditional place in the Farm Bill. So let's speak to that a little bit.
Well, in the survey, Building a Future with Farmers 2, you can find it at youngfarmers.org. Some of the stats from it have been shown behind us throughout the day. But 75% of the farmers who participated in the survey were not from farm families. And I mention that because the motivating factor for many of those young people entering agriculture is because they want to be a steward of natural resources. They want to be a part of the good food movement. They want to be really a positive force in their community, feeding people high quality food and doing good by their community by conserving resources, protecting the soil, the air, the water. This is a highly motivating factor, besides the fact that they can be outside and can be an entrepreneur, be their own boss. It can be a really great career. As it pertains to Farm Bill programs, EQIP, actually we asked people, what's your favorite USDA program? The EQIP high title program that was spearheaded by Kathleen Merrigan, Dr. Merrigan, who spoke earlier, and of course is our host here today. That was sort of her baby at the USDA, and she really brought that forward, and that has been hugely helpful for many of our farmers capitalizing their farms, because there's cost share there, but also extending the season. So when you're farming in New York, for instance, our farm, my husband and I have a 70-acre organic farm in New York State. We've been able to do some winter production and whatnot and actually be more profitable throughout the year. We actually employ people year-round now because of this program. So we're definitely going to be looking at EQIP as one program that we want to make sure is fully funded, and also there's opportunity for beginning farmers to access that program. Something that we've heard from some of our Western chapters is that they've had difficulty accessing that program because, like with many USDA programs and previously with the farm credit programs, the agency is looking to do big projects, right, as opposed to small ones. So one thing that we've been talking to USDA about is like a micro version of EQIP, right? Like how can we help young people get in? There's, I think, a misconception that young farmers are always looking to do small acreage or, you know, the farmer that you mentioned, he's probably starting out in his front yard because Hawaii,
Yeah.
think of the land values in Hawaii, right? You got to start
Exactly.
somewhere, and particularly if you're coming from a non-farm background, you're going to start with something that's probably pretty small that you can scale. And we really have seen this trajectory for many of our farmers. So as we are helping farmers along their path, we want to make sure that conservation programs like EQIP, are really tailored to their needs, and USDA is prepared to work with those new farmers where they are. The other program in the Farm Bill that we're putting a lot of focus on is the Asep program. It's dollars that go from USDA to land trusts, municipalities, and actually goes directly to the farmer for land conservation, to protect land from development, which is essential for protecting our prime soils across the country. But we are also asking USDA and Congress to think about the farmer in this dynamic, to make sure that we're also protecting the steward of that land. The Vermont Land Trust has pioneered this very innovative conservation easement that actually makes farmland permanently affordable to working farmers. It keeps the value of land at its agricultural value, which is absolutely essential for all of our goals, really, for, you know, having farms be profitable, having young people able to get into agriculture. We have to make sure this land is affordable. And there's this sort of nexus there with farmland conservation, where you can protect land so it's conserved, but also protect the farmer at the same time.
Great. Do you have anything to add, Roger?
So there are a number of programs. Lindsey talked about a couple of them, both in the conservation title of the Farm Bill. There are others, even in the conservation title, which is really to your question. CRP. Now, we're throwing out all these acronyms.
These are,
CRP is Conservation Reserve Program. This is farmers that are paid to set aside highly erodible land, generally for not productive use. Okay, so they plant a permanent cover.
And this is to keep nutrients out of our Chesapeake Bay and the rivers.
Exactly.
Without this money, it doesn't behoove a farmer to put a fence along your stream. There's no farm incentive per
So
se.
a lot of these
well, there is, I
CRP
guess, but-
acres are going to be planted along stream banks, in waterways, in areas that are subject to erosion. They may be really light, thin soils that are subject to soil erosion. And so the idea is to keep that land where it is and to keep the nutrients on the land, out of the water, out of the air, et cetera. So those programs, CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program, is a program that's focused on working land. So farmers get paid to adopt certain environmental practices that are good for us as society. Okay?
Does that include cover crops or?
Exactly. It includes
No-till.
things like cover crops, like no-till, like managed grazing practices, et cetera. Some of the EQIP programs that Lindsey talked about on a larger scale for conventional farmers may be cost share to help put in water systems on pasture areas so that you can spread grazing further around and do a better job of grazing the land. Or it may be used to put in cross fencing for the same kinds of purposes. So there are a number of those kinds of programs that are very, very important for farmers of all types. But for beginning farmers in particular, there was a time when I was a beginning farmer too. I spent most of my life as a farmer in North Dakota. I've been out here the last 9 years, but until that, I was a farmer all the time. And we're in the process of transitioning our farm to my nephew. When I started farming, these programs, all these initials that you've heard thrown about, none of them existed. Similar programs were there, but they had different initials, okay? But there's always been, in my lifetime, as a part of the Farm Bill, a focus on trying to do the right thing about our resources. And these programs were important back in my day. They're important today. They're going to be important long into the future because we've only got one Earth here, folks.
And that's another thing that maybe people don't always realize is part of the Farm Bill, all the conservation programs.
A lot of them.
It's all kind of lumped in with the other things.
Yep.
One thing, this is a total change in subject, but one thing I wanted to talk about today, I mentioned Lindsey earlier, we talk about kind of the movement toward wanting happy to eat. People talk about, even jokingly, wanting to eat happy chickens, happy cows, that sort of thing. But a theme I've noticed this year is a growing concern about happy farmers, making sure that they have what they need to not only be viable, but successful and also not miserable. There's been some really alarming coverage this year about farmer suicides in The Guardian. I know that's a really dreary and horrible note to end on, so we don't want to stay there, but this is the reality that a lot of the stories that I've written about happy farmers, maybe 5 years later, things aren't so happy, or we go through another cycle of farming where it's difficult economically. So what would each of you say to address that, and also kind of maybe shed some light on what makes you encouraged or helps farmers to stick it out and stick with it? Mark, do you have a happy?
Sure. Well, I would first of all say one happy story for us is that FFA's been the same acronym since 1928.
But it used to stand for something.
It used to stand for Future Farmers of America.
Yeah.
But even when you consider that, since 1988, when we began referring to ourselves as National FFA, it was really
I was an
about-
FFA kid, so
That's
I
right.
can
So
say
you can poke
He
me.
still
can
has
say
his jacket and it's zipped
back
up
when
as
it
well.
stood for Future Farmers of America, now it's just FFA. Yeah.
And I would say that a big reason for that was to be able to demonstrate to young people in all areas of the country that farming and agriculture is a viable profession.
For everybody.
It's something that they can do, and it's something that is important. I was with a group of students in Kansas City last Friday, and I told them that ultimately what our role is to prepare young people to help feed people. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a more noble cause than preparing young people to have a vocation in feeding other folks. So, what's our happy story? I think our happy story is that enthusiasm of young people around agriculture. I think a happy story when you see a young lady that knew nothing about agriculture, was placed in an agricultural education class, fell in love with it, fell in love with the leadership activities in FFA and how she could apply those in her work experience program, and continued to grow as an individual, and now is our national FFA president. Happens to be a young lady who is an African American from urban California. I think that's a great story, and it says a lot about where agriculture can go and where agriculture needs to go in order to feed the population.
Because having those examples are key for young people to picture themselves as a farmer as well, just being able to literally picture yourself in those shoes.
It is, and so and while we have those qualitative stories, we also know we need to measure our success. Mm-hmm. And about half of our students are going to a 4-year college or university, which means the other half are going into the military. They're going to a 2-year school to learn to be plumbers and welders and electricians and other great professions, mm-hmm. or they're going back to the family farm or beginning a farming vocation. So I think those are great stories, but as well, we want to be able to measure at FFA the impact we're having on young people around the country.
And even if you churn out somebody that isn't a farmer, maybe once they've realized what it takes to farm, they'll be willing to pay for it or continue an interest in an ongoing way.
And to support things like farm bills that will help individuals that are in that profession. And it is a profession. Mm-hmm. What Lindsey's doing is a profession.
Right.
Your nephew in North Dakota is following a profession, and I think we need to be very respectful of all the different aspects of agriculture that we think about, because I truly believe there's a place for everybody.
So to fast forward, they graduate high school, become a young farmer, and Lindsey's organization helps them along from there.
That's right. I'd want to say just FFA specifically, we have some wonderful FFA graduates that do come into our chapter network, and they're incredible leaders. They have poise, they're great speakers, and anyways, the leadership development in rural America is so important. Mm-hmm. I want to address your question specifically on Debbie Weingarten's piece, who used to be on staff at Young Farmers Coalition and was a farmer herself, and we're so proud of her journalism and really bringing this issue to so many people across the country who were unaware.
Yeah.
Our network, from the outset, we have chapters. Chapters were established because we wanted to give our farmers a platform to take action in their own areas, but it's also an essential social network. Farming can be very isolating, and it's incredibly important that farmers have a social network around them. This particular issue came to us this year because actually we had one of our chapter leaders who committed suicide. And suddenly this issue that I think we had somewhat associated with, times gone by for farmers, like this is the result of a farm crisis, at least in my mind. But having this bright young farmer in this position was terrible. And so Young Farmers Coalition nationally is thinking and partnering with National Farmers Union on thinking about ways to solve this from the federal perspective. And our Washington State chapter has taken incredible leadership on moving a bill at the state level there to provide greater support for farmers. But ultimately, it's that support network eventually to provide services to farmers, but it's that farm viability piece. It's all these major issues that we're seeing farmers facing at the beginning of their career, in the middle of their career, at the end of their career. We have to support them throughout and make sure that they are doing well. And that's really the foundation of it.
And I've seen that networking in play. I know Meredith, who spoke, they're a big part of that at the University of Maryland. And just buy a farmer a drink next time you see them. It's hard. And we have to wrap up today. But on that note, thank you all so much for sharing from your organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you.